Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode at Psychology for Growth, where I interview a variety of people, usually therapists and people working in the area of mental health. And one of the things that I'm really enjoying about this new process, this new thing I've been doing, is that I get to see some old friends, people I really respect and admire for who they are and the work they're doing. And today is no exception. I am talking today with Derek Shirley, one of my BFFs, all the way from Calgary, Alberta. We went to grad school together. And today we're going to talk about a variety of things. And I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah.
Derek,
Did,
good
did
to
you
see
say,
you,
I'm
man.
sorry, Richie, did you say one of your BFFs? How many can you have?
I know, man. I probably got about two, maybe
I don't want to hear.
three.
I don't want to
Yeah.
hear. I don't.
My
I
wife
can't.
is a BFF too. My wife is a
Oh well,
BFF, so
that's
she's in
different.
there.
All right, you had to dropping the wife card on me.
I know.
Okay, it's good to see you, man. It's
You
good to see you.
too. You
Yeah,
too, bro. You
yeah,
too,
yeah,
man.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
And
I'm
I'm
looking
happy
for
about this.
yeah,
This is something that I'm excited to help you in supporting what it is that you're doing. I think what you're doing is important, and you've got a lot of gifts to share. And I
mm,
think your information, your book, all that stuff is good. It's helpful for people. So keep doing what you're doing. And I'm just happy to be here to join you along this
oh, thank you.
along the
Thank
way.
you, my friend. Thank you for those nice words.
Yeah,
Yeah, so Derek, I mean, I've always admired you, just not who because of who you are, like I said, but all the great work you do. And I know you've done a lot of work, and we won't touch upon it today, but the piece around diversity, cultural diversity, probably have you back another time down the road so we can just
yeah,
talk about that. But today I want to talk about one of your recent passions, something you've been doing for the last few years in the area of men's mental health.
yeah.
And so, yeah, we'll just have a conversation around that with you and I being men and
You
working
bet.
with this really important population, too, that often don't access therapy for a variety of reasons.
Yeah,
Maybe we can talk about that. Actually, why
yeah.
don't we start with who you are and then we'll get into that topic?
All right. I'm just going to write that down. Why don't
Sure.
men come in? Well, because I get sometimes I'll get a lot of guys coming in, and I'm like, "So how'd you find me?" And they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, my wife did." And
Same
then
with me.
it's a bit of a daunting process for guys to actually to first get to the point where I'm like, okay, I kind of do need. I'm stuck enough that I recognize that I'm stuck, and that I don't know another way forward other than this particular option.
Right.
So that, and sometimes that's pitched to them by their partners. Sometimes it's pitched to them by their friends. Sometimes they're, you know, uh, somebody I'm working with will be like, oh, you need to talk to this guy because
Yeah.
what you're dealing with is the same stuff that I'm dealing with, and he's helped me. So go talk to this guy. So however guys get to me or however guys get to you is as long as they're getting to
Yeah.
one of us or to
That's right.
somebody,
To
right?
somebody.
And it's the so this is the part of the tricky part. So that's I've been doing my focus on men's mental health has been ongoing for about 5 years. Most of my practice for the last 20 years has been youth focused family work and adults. I like working with adults. It's
Mhm.
fun. And then, but when I moved back to Calgary back in, I think it was 2010, no, 2014, I joined a men's group here. And it was the first time I've ever actually been part of a men's group. And I'm not sure if your viewers are very familiar with Calgary. It's a big networking town, very much around like business, like that kind of stuff. So I go to this men's group meeting and I've got my business cards and I'm like ready to like network. And it was nothing like that. It was
Mhm.
about, it got started as a book club. But none of the guys wanted to call it a book club because I'm going to my book club, and they're always like, "Oh, you're going to your book club," and I was like, "Okay." So it wasn't a book club, but it was a book club, and it was okay.
Right.
We were reading books together, self development books, and to have a better understanding about ourselves, but to actually read through our own like books and experiences together, and then connect about the things that we're reading. You know, we'd read a chapter a week, and then we would talk about what we learned from that chapter. So we read about probably 3 or 4 books. You know what? Maybe more than that. Maybe 5 or 6 books together.
Mm.
And then over time, it just morphed into this connection space
Mm.
where the stuff that we were talking about from the books were applied to our own lives. So now we're talking about more of our own lives. And the more
Right.
we talk about our own lives, excuse me, especially because it's a smaller group, there was only maybe 6 or 7 guys at the time. So when you get to know somebody, then the bond starts coming. So then it was
Yeah.
almost like we come together and we're just talking about our own lives, but we're not really talking about the book. Then we just stopped reading books altogether. Like as a group, we would still like read our own books and like, oh, this is a great book if you guys want to read it, something like that. But it took me literally about a year and a half of being in this group every Friday morning for an hour and a half, connecting with these guys, driving every morning over across the city at 6:30 in the morning, at 7 o'clock, having coffee, sitting down. It took me a year and a half of that to actually connect in a way to the group that I had never connected to before. I didn't even realize how defended I was
Mm.
from connecting with men. It was not something, I mean, from basketball, playing basketball growing up, my teammates were the guys that I would always connect with. But
Right.
also, you know, I've never been. I'm biracial, so my mother's black, my father's white. Part of my experience growing up as being biracial is not really finding my own group, right? Because I didn't
Mm.
really feel like I identified
Right.
with what I used to call blacks, right? It was like
Yeah.
2
Yeah.
black parents,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't connect with white people, but I was going to school with mostly white people with a few. This is when I was in high school in London, Ontario. I was going to school with mostly white people and a few black people, and I would almost try on these different identities in different situations, right? Like, because I'm just trying to get my connection needs met.
Right.
I know this now as a psychologist doing work. Most of my work is with men and relationships.
Hmm.
So, but then the instinct was to find your tribe, find the ways, find ways for you to get your connection needs met, right? And
Mm.
you know about this, I know about this, is
Hmm.
about attachment. And
Hmm.
so the attachments then where I would have to just modify myself to be like other people in order for me to get the connection with the group. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
wasn't a great basketball player, but because I was tall and people was like, you should play basketball, I found a place for me with the basketball team where I got to be connected because my growing up, I didn't have a father figure. Disconnected from my mom. There's abuse in my childhood, and so I was always looking for where can I find my safe place? Where can I
Yeah.
find my group? Where can I find my guys or my team or my people or even of a relationship? Where can I get a girlfriend? Like it was just everything to find connection. So I started playing basketball, and then I was like, okay, do better at this because then if you're doing this is what everybody else is doing. And most of my life has been kind of following along in that sense of finding where are my connections, where are my connections, and just but not even knowing the need that was inside me
Right.
that was literally pulling me all the way along towards people, towards connections, towards friendships, right? So you and I found a home in each other when we were both in Calgary,
Yeah.
where we're both displaced. I
Yeah.
came from Victoria, you came from Toronto. You know, here we are. We got an office together. You're like,
Hmm.
okay, there's not a lot of guys in counseling psychology. It's like, what? You know, you're
Yeah.
Portuguese. I grew up with Portuguese guys. I'm like, check.
Yeah.
You have your
Yeah.
mom's sausage. You have your mom's sausage. I'm
Pepper
like,
sauce.
uni, Unico
Unico
tuna.
tuna.
Yeah, it's just like, oh my god. It's like
You knew
I
it. You
I
knew all of
I
that stuff.
always feel home with
Right.
this guy,
Yeah.
right? I already had a sense of familiarity, and there was
Sense of
home
connection.
there.
Quick connection.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
right? And so that from
I
a
felt the same way.
developmental perspective, right, was huge for me, but it's not until like understanding this stuff that I can look back and go, well, that would make sense. Of course, you would be connected to Richie, right? He is same to you. There's sameness there. And that's one of the ways that we connect with people is through our sameness, right? And we share an office together. And you're from Toronto, and I grew up in Toronto. And like, okay, like this is, and then it just grows from there. So um, that is, I guess, the work that I do. In answer to your
Yeah.
question, to kind of bring this background in the long way, is helping men understand what's gone wrong in their lives, or what's not necessarily wrong, but what's happened in their life experience, whether through childhood, whether through their parent interactions, with their correct relationships growing up, where they're struggling in their current relationships. Because these things can be drawn back to those primary caregiver relationships. So there's a disruption in the attachment bonds growing up. Then we have instincts. We still have our needs for attachment. Attachment equals survival, right? If we don't attach to somebody, to people, then as human beings, we don't survive. We die, right? We need our caregivers. When we come out of the womb, we're in connection, we come out, and then we need to have connection. Otherwise, we cannot sustain life. We need somebody else to take care of us, right? So if that
Yeah.
wiring is sitting inside of us the whole time, it doesn't go away.
It's
We,
a
as
biological
adults,
need.
it's a biological need, absolutely.
Yeah.
So as adults, biologically, we can still take care of ourselves. We don't necessarily need people, but we do need people. We need people to actually feel good and to connect, and it makes us feel there's fulfillment is in relationships. And so if we're not having those connections, we don't do well psychologically, we don't do well physically. You know what happens when people go into isolation? Look what happened through COVID. People go into like these pronounced experience of isolation where they're not prepared for it, and then they've got their own what was the word, cohorts, right? But single people that were already living alone by themselves are now boom into this space. They can't go to work, which is where they might have got connection before. They don't have family that's close by, and boom, now it's pronounced experiences of isolation, and people struggled big time through those experiences because it's all about relationships. It's all about our connections that we have with each other. And when those connections are good, when we have rest in the care and the connection with another person, we feel good and we feel peace inside. Somebody might call that happiness. I just call it rest. And when we're facing separation, facing disconnection from people that are important to us in our lives, we struggle with that. That's where pain comes in, right? And then our instincts are to then close the gap, try to find those connections again, try to repair, try to get to the other side. If you're having an argument with your partner, it's like, let's get to the other side. Let's hug, let's just connect. Can we just get past this? Because our instinct is like, I want to be back in this space where there's rest in our relationship. And when that is not there, then it's we're in pain.
Right.
We're in pain.
When
How people respond to that pain is differently. Is different for
right.
different people, is how they respond to that pain. Some people shut themselves off from going into relationships. They're like, I don't trust them, so I'm going to stay out of connection with people, deep connection. So you get some guys are just like, I can't go deeply into relationships because they're scared that when their heart's out there, it's vulnerable, and then they're like, oh, I can't do this anymore, right? But it's very complicated. It's very, very complicated. So long story short, that's what I do, is just help guys
Yeah.
figure that stuff out.
That's a fantastic introduction, man. You know, you not only did tell us who you are, your origins and background, but we got some really deep, fantastic topics there. You know, and some really I guess, fundamental principles about, psychology and mental health, which is relationships and connection. You know, and I put in
Yes.
my book the letter R, which for promise, which stands for relationship. But when I was doing some research on that particular domain, it was pretty consistent in to find out like just the benefits of relationship. And like you were saying, like we were saying, biological need, like we're all hardwired to connect,
Yes.
and some of these early psychologists I was thinking about, was Alfred Adler. He wrote about the need to belong, like as that one of the fundamental needs we all have is the need to belong. Whether we're a child in the schoolyard, we want to have a little group, or whether we're someone in an office building, we want to hang around with our colleagues and talk and get the strong need for connection. And you were saying about, in talking about men and how a lot of men really struggle to identify that this is the need they have. They have this need
Yeah.
to connect, right? I guess they have a hard time identifying it and articulating it. Is that what you
Yes.
often hear about in the group? Is that these guys, through your work, that they're longing for need, but they perhaps aren't articulating it?
So some guys can articulate it, and some guys just feel it.
Mm, mm,
So, and the difference between those two, and whether it's men or women, it's just like if we can feel our loneliness, when we can feel our experience of loneliness, then we can identify and we can name it. Then we're able to go like, I am needing connection, right? But if you're not identifying, if you can't feel what's there, if you can't identify the feeling that's there, maybe it's because it's been there for so long, and it's just you've become like accustomed to not turning towards the emotions, what's going on for you inside, because that is our, like, it's like an alert system. It's like
mm.
our emotions are part of our system that says, connected to our senses, that says, hey, there's something you need to pay attention to here, right? They serve a specific purpose.
Right.
And so if we look to the emotions for what it is, the information that they're trying to tell us based on what it is we're feeling, whether it's loneliness or frustration or alarm, anxiety, like our
Mm,
bodies, our emotions are trying to get our attention, and they do
mm.
it in a very succinct way, connected to our physiology. So if we are in connection with our emotions, we can name it. We go like, I'm feeling pretty lonely right now, right? I miss people. And so if that's there, then that's a good first step, is just naming what it is that I'm
Naming.
actually feeling right now, right? Because then it becomes clear. It's like, oh, I'm lonely. This is the pain of disconnection. This is the pain of loneliness. But
Yeah.
when you understand that this is loneliness, then the next thing is like, I need connection. Who can I call? Who can I connect with? Where can I go? Do I have any friends? And this is where people, sometimes these guys are like, I don't actually have any friends. I
Yeah.
don't. I, I like I don't. My wife is my only friend, or I've been working so much that I really don't have deep connections. I maybe some guys from high school, and I maybe I could, I guess, but I haven't talked to them in such a long time, and it doesn't matter. You can still reach out and have connection, because your instinct, your wiring, your body, your emotions are telling you, oh, I need connection. So that is it will need the first rule of emotions. So this is a lot of Gordon Neufeld stuff. He's a
Mhm.
developmental psychologist that I've been doing a lot of studying around understanding more of this, and how it affects myself in relationship, how it affects the men that I work with, and just it's been so helpful understanding this from this
Yeah.
sort of Gordon Neufeld. Um, and so leaning into the emotions helps you understand what actually your experience is of the world that you're dealing with in that moment. So if you're feeling something, right? If I'm feeling, let's just say I'm just feeling kind of low, my mood is low, I'm maybe a bit irritable, um, I don't have any energy, I'm kind of lethargic, I'm like, I don't really care, I'm just watching all of Netflix. Like it's like, what is it that I'm feeling there? Then this is the difference. If I do not have access to my feelings, or I don't point to them, I don't look towards them, because I've been taught, many men have been taught to not feel. Your emotions are nuisance. They're not you. They're weak. All
Push
those
it
kinds of
down.
messages.
That's
Push
right.
it down, or they've grown up in an environment where their emotional experience was not um, warranted. It was not wanted. It wasn't needed. And so, if the emotions of the parents were so big, then the kid's emotions, then there's no room for the kid to have their emotional experience. So you grow
Right.
up in that environment, you almost grow up with this kind of muzzle and mute on your own emotional experience. It's not that you don't have your emotional experience, you still do. Our emotions are they're pre-verbal. Before we could even talk, we have our emotions. So it's not that they go anywhere, but we just don't feel them. We learn to turn away from them. We learn to shut them off. But that's the problem.
Right.
When we're shutting ourselves off from feeling what it is that we're already experiencing emotionally, it stores up inside us. And so
Mm,
this is where pain starts showing up for people in different ways, because it becomes this overwhelming experience of it's like I'm just low. I don't care about things. I'm apathetic. Like there's so much stuff. So for some, if you can name the feeling that's there, that can help you
hmm
understand like what is it the need that must be met in order
mm,
to address what that feeling is there. But if you're not feeling it, you're not naming it, you're just in it. You're just in
yeah.
it. And then you're just, well, I'm feeling, meh, I'm going to go work out. I'm going to go do this. I distract myself. I go to work. I go to do this. And so you're completely missing the information that the emotion is trying to tell you about what's actually important for you right now, what it is that you're actually needing. So somebody could be lonely, not know it, but then, okay, well, I'm just feeling crappy. So I'm just going to go to the gym, for 2 hours or 3 hours, or
Right.
then I'm just going to watch TV, or I'm just going to focus on work. I'm just going to, distract myself with anything, TV, scrollings, phones, news feeds, whatever it is, because the emotion still is trying to get their attention. And it will
Right.
always do that. It will always be there to try to get your attention until you turn toward it. And once you turn toward
Mm.
it, then it starts to move through you.
I love that. Yeah, just sort of quite a few things stood out for me in what you were talking there. And let's just start off with this last point, like facing it, right? Like just
Yeah.
having that courage. And I think a lot of men, because of perhaps bad role modeling from some of the men in their lives, father, uncle, grandpa, that a lot of men do,
Society.
society
Yeah.
do, shy away from confronting some of those emotions. Like they just repress, deny it, distract themselves, as you were saying. The other thing
Yeah.
that I have found in my work, and I'm glad you touched upon it, was one of these first steps, which is the naming of it. Right?
Yeah.
I have an activity where you're familiar with it, that anger iceberg, where I
Yes.
talk about using that as an analogy, whereby what we see on top of the water, the top layer of an iceberg, the 10%, is often anger, right? Which is what a lot of men display, or not just men, but a lot of people who aren't in touch with their emotions will often display anger. And then
Yeah.
I'll ask them, well, what are the emotions preceding it that came before the anger? What are some of these emotions? And so many times, throughout my career, when I ask guys about the emotions, to name it, other than mad, glad, sad, they don't know what else, right? It's just this.
Absolutely.
And so one of my first steps, and I'm curious to hear what some of your first steps are, is one of my first steps is let's just expand your vocabulary of emotions. Let's just become a little more familiar with it. Step one. And then step two is also what you said, identifying it in the body. Like our
Yes.
bodies store a lot of these feelings.
Yes.
Is that
Yes.
some of the work you'll do, like, in some of these initial
Yes.
steps of working with men, is the naming
Yeah.
and then identifying it where in the body?
So a guy will come in and he'll tell me what's going on. I usually work with a lot of guys that are going through difficulties in their relationship, not necessarily
Right.
to the point of separation, divorce, but they're struggling,
Sure.
right? And
Conflict.
however
Yeah.
they got,
Yeah.
into my office or your office is how they got there. But as they're talking about something, I'll check on it's like, what are you feeling right now? Like, not how are you feeling, but what are you feeling? What are you feeling right now?
In the moment.
And that, yeah. And then there's a moment where there's just like a pause, and it just depends on, um, maybe I'll just use the word emotional literacy, right?
Mm,
Because I don't even know if that's a word exists, but it just seems to
mm.
fit in my head
Oh,
right now.
great.
It
Yeah,
works.
it's a
It's like
great concept.
it's like I can name this, or I can just sense it, but I can't put words to it. And so for some, I was like, "What are you feeling right now?" And they'll be able to go like frustration, or they're like like
Mm,
sad, or they won't. But a lot of them, so like, ah, I don't know. I don't know. it feels like I want to do this, right?
Right.
And so what they'll talk about is the behavior. They're like, I want to like do this. I want to like, you know, like I just want to leave, or I just want to like whatever it is. But so we'll talk about the behavior. I say, okay, so let's back up. So that behavior is motivated. It's by from an emotion. That emotion is moving you to take action. So your action here is to do this. But what's the emotion that's underneath that's driving that behavior? That's driving that desire to go do something. What's that underneath? And then they'll sit back for a moment. It's like, uh, and sometimes it's hard. It's hard to name
Yeah.
it. And for some men, they don't have the vocabulary around it.
That's
It's not a
right.
bad thing. It's just
No.
what's happened.
Yeah.
You know, it's how we've been socialized. It's what our vocabulary is the amount of words that we use, all that stuff. So then for those guys, I might go to the body and go like, okay, what is it that you're feeling right now in your body? Physiologically, what are you noticing that's there? Based on this, what is it that you're feeling in your body? And where is it showing up in your body? So a lot of guys are like here, right? It's like, oh, I'm feeling like it feels
In the
like
chest.
something like chest,
Yeah.
right? And it's I'm like, okay, stay with that feeling. Okay. What if you can put words to that feeling, what would it be saying right now? Right?
Mm.
What is it saying right now? That sensation. So it's like like I'm not safe, right? Or like I'm feeling lost. I'm like,
Mm.
now we're getting deeper into it, but it's hard sometimes to name what it is that we're feeling. So that's when I go to the body, because the body, like the body, there's a great book, The Body Holds the Score, and it talks about trauma and how the trauma is
Vanderkolk.
stored in the body. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like what is going on in the body, because the body is connected to the nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, your parasympathetic nervous system. And so usually what happens in your sympathetic nervous system is your threat detector, right? And so that will show up in like ways inside your body that will, in a way of almost like your adrenaline starts pumping up, you feel a bit like, you know, you feel tension in your upper body and your chest plate, things like that. It's like, okay, and just, I try to go deeper into what is it they experience there feeling wise, and then eventually we get down to the emotions. We get down to actually naming that, because then I might help them. I'm like, let's
Mm.
try this on for size. Like, what is it you just described for me? It's like, is that frustration that you're feeling, or is that alarm that you're feeling in your body? I mean, um, Neufeld talks about like, you know, understanding anxiety from using the different word of alarm. And so your body is in a state of alarm. It's sensing something. It means I got to pay attention to it, right? And so that's the threat detector, right? So then the alarm is going off, but is this a real alarm or is this a false alarm, right? Is this a real thing that I need to pay attention to? Or is this something that's like, no, actually, nothing's really going on. This is a false alarm. But if we don't have connection with our alarm, we don't have connection with our body, we're completely missing whether it's real, false, anything. We're just now in instinct trying to distract ourselves, trying to do something. I'll meditate, I'll breathe, but we still don't turn towards the feeling and try to understand what it's trying to tell us.
Mm.
And that is pivotal. If you just
Mm.
try to understand, like try to connect with the feeling, put a word to it. What is it trying to tell you? What's it connected to? What experience is it connected to? What are you thinking about in your brain right now? What is about your relationship? What's going on in your relationship that's making you feel this way? Okay, it's this. I had a fight with my partner earlier on, and so now I'm feeling, I'm feeling frustrated. Okay,
Mm.
right? Frustrations, emotions. It's like something's not working for me. So what is it they're trying to get to work for you? It's like, well, that's not working. I need to do, if she just did this, then I would feel better, right? Well,
Mm.
that's not going to work. Sometimes it might, but generally it's just like we can't change other people's behaviors so that we feel differently. We can point something out if somebody's mistreating us or something like that. It's like, when you're talking to me that way, um, I'm not okay with that. That doesn't make me feel good, and it doesn't sit well with me. And that's okay to say, right? Like we do need to put some words to some of those things sometimes, when somebody's treating us with disrespect, but we also have to check in with ourselves, like, what am I feeling right now around this? Because this is like, she's he or she is talking to me this way, but it seems okay, but I am having this reaction based on this. What is it? Her tone, the words, what is my feeling here? If we don't pay attention to that, we're lost. We don't know what's going
Right.
on. No
Right.
idea what's going on inside of us. While there's a whole mess that's going on, but we're missing it. So then we distract. We go do something else, and it gets to be a pretty vicious cycle sometimes.
Yeah. 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 We go do something else. We leave. Just right. We it's stonewalling. One of those four horsemen, I think, that
Oh
Gottman
yeah,
talks about,
Gottman.
right?
Yeah,
We
yeah,
stonewall. Yeah. But one of the things I was thinking about was, in hearing you talk there, a lot of this emphasis on the body. And so we recognize sort of labeling. I like your phrase of emotional literacy. I like that a lot. So you increase the literacy through some education. And then you help them identify paying attention to their own bodies, like where does it reside, this feeling you got. But one of
yeah,
the thoughts I had around that was just in my work around trauma, and for people who've experienced a lot of trauma, like perhaps chronic or just more than a single event, let's say more than a single traumatic event, but rather a series of events. But people who've lived in trauma, oftentimes there's this disconnection from the body
yeah,
because, right, going back to what you had said earlier, about sometimes we are afraid to confront that emotion. I think that's might be one of the reasons that leads to a disconnection, is that we are afraid to really tap into that emotion, um, and recognize where is it in our body. Um, so I want to also bring it back to some of these earlier relationships and the role of modeling. And do you hear this in some of the men you've worked with? Because I know I've heard it, but I just want to hear some of your experiences where a lot of these guys, a lot of the men who struggle identifying some emotions, um, it's because they never really had any good role models as well. One of the reasons, right, is that they never saw dad cry, never saw dad apologize. Do you hear things like that as well?
yeah, and there is merit to that. Um, and it's like so, but I'll go back to this kind of emotional literacy thing. As children, we will our languaging is based on what it is we're hearing. So we're going to
Hmm.
use the words that are used with us, right?
Right.
In part of a formation of our own vocabulary. So if you have a parent that's using words with a child that are emotional words, like I notice that you're feeling frustrated right now, or like, son, what's going on for you? You seem really confused, or you seem to be lost, or you seem to be really worried about something. So if a parent is using that language, then the kid will start to use that language themselves, right?
Right.
But if a parent,
Right.
and this is where we go back to this other part, if a parent isn't connected to their own emotional self, they're not using that language with themselves. That language doesn't exist even in their own dialogue within themselves. So they're not using that language with their kids. And so there is modeling in that sense, but there's also like, how can anyone who is disconnected from themselves emotionally sit in a spot where emotional things are coming up and not feel overwhelmed? They're going to feel different things simply because we have mirror neurons. We're going to be connected to somebody emotionally. If somebody's showing emotion, we're going to experience that emotion as well. And this is where a lot of problem solving comes in. And so what
Mm.
shows up a lot of times is, um, in relationships, and this is just very like typical, right? So typical male female relationship, and it's not, I don't see it as different in male male or same sex relationships, but typically in my work I'll see a man and his partner, and she is having her emotional expression, so she's able to put words to her emotions because growing up socialization's been different. Men are allowed to be angry and frustrated. That's an emotion that's okay. We're not allowed to be hurt because then you're weak, you're vulnerable, that kind of stuff. Women, they've been allowed to have hurt feelings and sadness and tears. but they're not allowed to be angry, right? And so like you just see some of that basic kind of socialization around that. So let's just say a guy is sitting with his partner and she's talking about her emotions and things like that. And he starts feeling his emotions stirred up with her emotions, whether they're his or hers or whoever. But now he starts feeling this. Generally happens now is because I don't know what to do with these feelings, I start trying to problem solve what's going on for the other person so that they
Mm.
don't feel that way. So if they
Try to
stop feeling
fix.
that way, yes, to fix it. So if they stop feeling this way, then I'll stop feeling this way. Now, at the same time, it's like if I can fix the problem that's created that this person's experiencing emotionally, because it's emotional, the issue might not be, it's an emotional problem that they're dealing with, but it might be based on an experience. So problem solving is like, well, what if you just change this? And then that's where partners will go like, okay, I don't need, like, they're not going to say this out loud, but it's like, I don't need you to fix this. I just need space to get this out. Right. And if we just understood that there's almost like two different languages. So we can't solve emotional problems with logic. We can just create space for the emotions to come up and to move and to come out. Because when that's what needs to happen is the actual expression of emotions. Then once that is out, then our that thinking part of our brain comes back online, our executive functioning. We can possibly look at problem solving. But if we can just hold the space for the emotion to come up without trying to problem solve it, we'll get way farther. We'll get way farther in our
Yeah.
relationships, and we won't be quite as disconnected because there's a lot of times people get frustrated, and especially because I do a lot of work with people in career counseling where they've been let go and they've been laid off or whatever. And I still do this work now. And so when they're laid off or they've lost their job, so many people in their lives are like, well, have you thought about this? Have you tried this? What about this? What about this? What about this? And it's nothing but problem solving. That person's got it. They can figure it out what's going on for them. What they're needing is just a space to go, this sucks. Like, I'm scared.
Yeah.
And they need somebody to go like, yeah, it is scary, man. Holy moly. Like, your family's dependent upon you. You got this going on, like got this going on, you got this going on. Like, holy wow. Yeah, it does suck. And that's it. Like, if
That's
we
it.
just stop there, we would do so much more for that person who's struggling than going like, yeah, this sucks. Have you thought about this? What about this? Have you tried this? Like, let's let them have their emotional experience first. Let it move, let it be expressed. The first of emotions, it seeks expression. So let it be expressed, create the space for that to come out, and then don't even have to lean into problem solving. That person can figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, if you need some help trying to figure this out, let me know. Yeah, I can
Yeah.
probably help you. Or
Yeah.
I may not be able to help you, but somebody else might. Maybe I can help you find somebody that can help you do that. But just create the space, hold the space for them to have that to come up and out, rather than jumping in and trying to solve the problem because we're not doing well with their emotions. We don't do well because when somebody that we care about is struggling, that is hard for us.
Yeah.
That is a hard experience for us. And so we tend to want to problem solve that, but it's for the wrong reasons. It's so that we don't feel the same stuff that they're feeling. It's like, I'm the one that's having the problem with this emotion. Right. So it just doesn't work that way. It doesn't work consistently enough that way. And it can create actually even bigger gaps in connections with people because they're not really being heard. They don't really feel that they're actually being understood or heard. There's no space for them to just feel what they're feeling. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just thinking of a few things here, is when people want to know, when guys want to know, what is therapy, what's the purpose? What do we do in here? I think you articulated a really good point, which is sometimes that therapist's office, it's just a place where you have this space to talk
Yes.
about and process and explore and
Yes.
reflect. Just that space, having that like the physical space, literally,
Yes.
to do that. And it's so important, especially, in trauma work where so that a person can really go process some of these painful memories. But as long as there's a safe space, and
Yeah.
and then the other thing I was thinking about that you mentioned, you know, is, you know, about the need to feel heard is, yeah, I find that sometimes that's one of the things I educate a lot of men on. And I recognize we're generalizing here. We are talking,
Yeah.
right? Just we're
Yeah.
generalizing, but in a lot of the men I work with, you know, and when we're talking about conflict in relationships, whether it's a same sex relationship or an opposite sex relationship, I find this comes up is where these guys feel like they got to fix, they got to problem solve, and
Yeah.
their partner just wants what you
They
suggested
just
there.
want space to, one of the
Exactly.
biggest
Just to
things
listen.
that it's just one of the things, and you probably it's like learned in grad school. I think it was Nancy Dudley's class, and
Mm,
there was this one little thing. It was just like, tell me more about that,
mm,
right? And I
that's
thought
it.
it was just like that feels
Oh,
kind of intrusive, but
mhm.
when it's like I'm interested. Tell
Yeah.
me more
More.
about that. Tell me more about what you're feeling right now. Just
I don't
tell
need
me
to
more.
fix it. Just tell me more.
Yeah, just tell me more about that. Help
Yeah.
me understand it from this perspective that you're in, right? And that's what you do in therapy, right? You
Yeah.
show that interest and you're like, whether you have a question, it's like, just tell me more about that. You're showing interest. And then once that is felt, right? And you're very, very disarming, Richie. This is one of the things I absolutely love about you is you are so disarming. You are so like, oh, how do I put it, man? Yeah, disarming is the word. He's like, you can't, it's almost like you can't have your armor on around you. You're just kind of like this guy is like, just makes you feel safe.
Mm,
And as long as they get in your space,
mhm.
right, you feel safe. And then once you feel that, there's something just shifts. It's okay to
Yeah.
talk.
It's
Like
okay.
it's this guy's actually he's a safe person to talk to. And some of the work obviously you got to do on relationship building in the therapeutic context is like, maybe that's self-disclosure, maybe whatever that is, but there's
Sure.
still that space of like when you come in, you're open to them. You're excited to see them. You're like, and that's you. That's
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
man. That's you to a T. So you're very disarming in that way, and that's the first step for emotional connection. If it feels safe
Mhm.
for me to talk, and that's one of the things about the men's group. One of the things I didn't even realize how deep it was, because I was going through a real struggle. I was going through a divorce, and I thought I was fine. I honestly thought I was okay. And then I was on my way to the guy's house for our meeting, and I turned the corner, I hit a street, and all I felt was all of a sudden this overwhelming, like sadness and tears coming up inside me.
Yeah.
And I could have told you 5 minutes earlier, I'm like, I'm completely fine. But because I was getting in proximity of safe men and a safe place,
Mm,
unconsciously, my body
mm,
knew that it was okay for the emotions to come
mhm.
up and out. So for a lot of men and a lot of people, period, we need safety for the emotions to actually come up. Quietness. A lot of people will struggle at night when it's quiet, when they're not attending to anybody, the kids are asleep, this is gone, workday's over, and then you turn off the TV, and then there's this moment. And if you're not just on your routine of like, okay, I'm gonna brush my teeth, go to bed, da 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 da, then if you pause and just connect, you'll feel a ton there. In fact, actually, to probably even check in with yourself before you even turn on the TV about what feeling is
Right,
there,
right.
right? Because if it's boredom, it's like I got nothing to do. I'm bored. Well, that's another way of let's look another way of looking at alarm. It's like means I'm restless on my own and I need something to fill this experience right now. So I'm just really restless. So I was like, okay, well, just connect with that feeling. Just start noticing like, oh wow, I'm feeling bored, I'm feeling restless. Like what and then you just be curious about it. You can
Yeah,
still go watch TV, but just take a moment to stop for a quick second. Like, what is this feeling that's here? Right? Does that make
yeah.
sense?
Absolutely. Derek, I'm just mindful of the time here, and there's
Yeah,
just
man.
so much information. I want us to do this again, man, because it's so good. I mean, just to see you, but also just to have this conversation. I just enjoyed so
Yeah.
much. But I guess I just want to, as we finish up here, I just wanted to recap
Okay.
and summarize these things because I know one of your talents, one of your gifts, is you're really able to like apply and treat and intervene. Um, and so I wanted to just summarize some of these things you talked about. And then so feel free to add. But I guess number
Yeah. Yeah.
one is that it sounds like it's important to just sort of increase our emotional literacy. I love that. Just increase the vocabulary. Sometimes a simple Google search on, list of emotions. I think that can help a lot. Number two is that once you become a bit familiar with some of these different emotions, try to reflect on where it is happening in the body,
Yeah.
right? This identification. A third
Or
thing
the other
that's
way around. Or the
or the
other way
other way.
around. You might not be able to name it, but you'll
Mm,
feel it.
got
And so
it.
you sometimes you would just go to the feeling that's there,
Got it.
and then that might help you name it.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I like that. I like that clarification. Can go either way.
Yeah.
A third thing that stood out for me was this piece around having a safe place, right?
Yeah.
And that in a relationship, you want to create that safe place as well. What can you do for your partner where they will feel like they can express their emotions respectfully? And you help to model that as a person. And then another thing here is this fourth thing was just listen sometimes rather than feeling like you gotta fix and give suggestions and recommendations to your loved one about what they should do. They just want to be heard. And
Yeah.
sometimes the best thing we can do is what Dr. Dudley had said, tell me more.
Tell
Tell
me
me
more.
more. I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
Was there
Just tell
anything
me
else you
more.
wanted to add to that? Maybe a fifth point, something
Yeah.
you want to
The
add?
other point here is around in order to create a safe space and to hold some space for somebody else to have their emotional expressions or whatever emotional space, you've got to be grounded yourself, right?
Right.
If you're up
Balanced.
in your own space and somebody is coming with some of their stuff, if you're not grounded in yourself, then you're not going to be able to hold that space very well for anybody else. You will
Yeah.
revert to either problem
Right.
solving or, you just won't even hear any of it. You'll just be kind of like present, but you're not really invested in the conversation because you got your own stuff going on. So we got to do our own work. We've got to do our own work to find an experience of groundedness inside of ourselves. And that means we got to do our own emotional work to figure out what is it that I'm feeling here that's making me feel all up here. And then we can breathing is one of the ways I honestly is like
Breathing.
keep going back to is like deep breath where you have a breath in, you hold at the top, and then you breathe out for longer than you've breathed in. So you engage your parasympathetic nervous system on the out breath. You do that 3 times, few times a day, you'll ground yourself in your own, like you find rest in your own body. If you're not doing that, you're like all throughout
Right.
the day. And then you come
Right.
home at the end of the day and it's like up here and the kids are wild and this is what's going on. And you're already up here too. Like you don't have much in the tank. So before you walk in that door, ground yourself, connect with yourself, find your basement, right? And then you can go in. Okay.
Yeah.
Just help in the transition between that. Because if you're up here and you're not connecting yourself, you're not able to create or hold that space for anybody else to have their stuff, especially when you're a parent, right? It's so
Just
important when you're a parent. Yeah.
yeah, just I mean, I do the 4-7-8. I teach a lot of my clients that breathe in for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8. So I'm glad you
Yes.
mentioned that. And I find that a couple benefits. Number one is, as you talked about, this sort of calming of the nervous system. But number
Yeah.
two is that it really forces us to pause and ground, right?
Yes.
Like it just,
Yes.
all these things that are distracting us or causing us stress. Let's just take a couple seconds and just put that
Yes.
out of our mind and just focus on our breath.
And I recognize that in this time together, I probably should have grounded myself a few times because I get really excited talking about this stuff, and I get talking about you. It's like I
Same
have
here,
verbal
man.
diarrhea, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, Richie!" I probably should have grounded a few times. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Get down to the basement, Derek. All right, settle stuff down. Okay, right."
Like, it just the conversation is
I love talking to
therapeutic,
you, though.
man. I enjoy it. Same
Yeah,
here, man. Same here.
yeah,
Everyone, thank you for following, for listening to the interview. If you haven't yet, pick up my book, The Promise Wheel. You can find it on Amazon. I talk about a lot of these things that Derek mentioned, especially when the chapter relating to the letter R on relationships. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe to the channel. Check out my newsletter, which I release a couple times a month. And once again, Derek, thank you so much. I really appreciate this, and I look forward to having you back soon. Until
yeah,
then,
man. Good to see you, man. Thank you
you
so
too.
much.
You're very welcome. Until then, everyone, I hope this piece of psychology helps with your healing and your improvement and your growth. Take care.